Welcome to Roll Credits, where movie lovers get the trivia they didn't know they needed, made with a little help from AI, so double-check your facts. Today, we're diving into Michael Jackson. Did you know the film uses Michael Jackson's original music and choreography to recreate some of his most iconic performances? And before we get into it, drop a comment with what we should cover next, old or new.
Honestly, I am so excited to finally talk about this one. It's just a massive, massive production.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, imagine being handed the keys to a $155 million movie, right?
Mhm.
But the catch is, you have to perfectly recreate the most famous, heavily scrutinized dance routines in human history, to the point where your feet literally bleed through your shoes.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure for anyone, let alone someone who hasn't really done this before.
Exactly. Oh, and one more detail. You've never acted a single day in your life. So the mission of this deep dive for you listening is to really explore this staggering production, the blending of fact and fiction, and all the intense behind-the-scenes trivia of director Antoine Fuqua's new biopic, Michael. Okay, let's unpack this, because if a film promises the ultimate recreation of the King of Pop, the entire project basically lives or dies on the shoulders of whoever steps into those loafers.
It really does. It's an almost impossible casting challenge because you need someone who can carry an absolutely unbearable level of global scrutiny.
Right.
And, the production team, they didn't go the traditional route here. They didn't find some seasoned A-list Hollywood star and just throw prosthetics on them. They cast Jafar Jackson, who is Michael's actual nephew, Jermaine Jackson's son.
Which I keep getting hung up on, honestly. Like, Jafar had zero acting experience. I think his actual career goal was just to compose film scores.
Yeah, he was much more behind the scenes musically.
Right. Yet in 2020, he hears that producer Graham King has secured the rights to this massive story. And instead of, hiring agents or doing these grueling chemistry reads, he literally just records a voice note on his phone. He speaks in character as Michael, sings this unreleased lullaby called Peter Pan, and just hit send.
Which is such an incredibly bold, unorthodox move. I mean, nobody does that.
But it worked.
It totally worked. Graham King heard that audio and practically instantly got Jafar an acting coach. But what really reveals a lot about Jafar's mindset here is that he kept this massive, life-altering secret from his entire family, even his own mother, for a full year.
Another year, wow.
Yeah. He wanted to quietly prove to himself that he could actually carry the emotional weight of this performance before, bringing the reality of it to his family's doorstep.
That just speaks to this intense level of self-imposed isolation and the physical preparation. I mean, it sounds less like acting rehearsal and more like preparing for a heavyweight title fight.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about a 2-year obsession. He goes through these relentless 20-day boot camps with Michael's original choreographers, the Samoan brothers, Rich and Tone Talluega. And they'd actually worked with Michael back in 2002.
Yeah, having them on board adds this layer of genuine authenticity that you just can't fake.
Definitely. And Jafar even moves back into the empty Jackson family compound, Havenhurst. He sleeps on the floor on this thin Japanese mattress, literally just to absorb whatever residual energy is left in the walls of that house. And he's writing affirmations on his mirrors, just like his uncle did.
He was completely stripping away his own identity, He had to build this character from the ground up. He wasn't trying to just mimic the physical shapes of the dancing. He was trying to understand the actual psychological state required to move that way.
Right, the motivation behind the moves.
Exactly. And the physical toll was just severe. Because he was practicing in authentic loafers instead of, athletic shoes, he danced until his feet bled and went completely numb.
That sounds agonizing.
It was. I mean, just mastering the Billie Jean routine for the famous Motown 25 recreation took him a full year of daily repetition, just that one routine.
A year. Which actually brings up a mechanical detail about dancing that totally recontextualizes that whole effort for me. Learning the moonwalk and those iconic spins was uniquely agonizing for Jafar, because naturally his body wants to spin to the right.
Oh, right.
But Michael Jackson, famously and very specifically, spun to his left.
Yeah, and that just completely upends your physical equilibrium, your center of gravity, your muscle memory. Literally everything in your body fights against that motion.
It's like taking a professional baseball player, putting him in the bottom of the ninth in the World Series, and forcing him to bat from the opposite side of the plate. Your brain knows what to do, but your body completely rejects the mechanics.
That's a great how to put it.
So, hearing all this, I have to ask you, does having familial DNA actually help with a performance of this magnitude? Or does Knowing the family that intimately, combined with the pressure of a $155 million budget, just make this a massive psychological trap for Jafar.
Well, what's fascinating here is that director Antoine Fuqua saw entirely past the mimicry and the shared facial structure,
Right.
He saw a shared perfectionism.
Okay, yeah.
Jafar didn't just inherit this role because of his last name. He earned it through this scientific, borderline obsessive dissection of performance. Fuqua noted that Jafar operates with the exact same hunger that Michael had. So the DNA might give him the silhouette, sure, but it was that grueling, bleeding feet work ethic that unlocked the actual character for the camera.
And that internal drive for perfection didn't just manifest out of nowhere either. It was forged in a very specific, incredibly intense environment, which naturally shifts our focus to the external pressure, specifically how the film handles the deeply complex Jackson family dynamics.
Right, because the film leans heavily into the contrast between Michael, the invincible Superman on stage, and the profoundly lonely, searching child offstage.
Yeah.
And to understand that dichotomy, the narrative spends significant time exploring his father, Joe Jackson, portrayed by Coleman Domingo.
Alongside Nia Long playing Catherine and Trey Horton playing Marlon,
Right.
right? Who the film positions as Michael's vital right-hand man and sort of the jokester holding the brothers' sanity together on the road.
Exactly. But Coleman Domingo's approach to Joe Jackson is what really anchors this tension, because he actively wanted to avoid playing a one-dimensional, mustache-twirling villain.
Which would be the easy route.
Totally. Instead, he focused on the psychology of men from a pre-civil rights generation. Men who faced a really hostile world and truly believed that brutal, uncompromising strictness was the absolute only way to armor their children and provide a way out of poverty. Domingo tried to show those hidden vulnerabilities operating right alongside the harshness.
Right, but I understand the artistic desire for nuance, obviously, but I have to push back on this framing a little bit.
Sure.
Because it's a heavily documented fact, and it's noted right in the source material we're looking at, that Michael openly admitted to being physically beaten by his father. So by focusing on Joe's, hidden vulnerabilities, does the film risk overly softening a genuinely abusive figure just for the sake of Hollywood sentimentality?
That is the tightrope of biographical storytelling, isn't it? Like, how do you portray a figure who caused deep, lifelong trauma, but also architected unimaginable global success?
It's a tough balance.
It is. The filmmakers attempt to balance tone and historical truth here. They don't shy away from the grueling rehearsals, or the palpable fear the boys felt, or the resulting emotional scars. But they try to provide the historical and socioeconomic context of the era to explain why Joe behaved that way.
Right, so it's not about forgiving the behavior.
No, not at all. It's about understanding the mechanics of the family machine.
Seeing the cogs turning behind the strictness, essentially.
Precisely. And the film uses that pressurized family dynamic to build toward a massive turning point. We see the climax of this tension during the 1984 Victory Tour.
Oh, man. Yeah, the relationships with his brothers have severely deteriorated under the weight of his exploding solo fame. And it culminates in Michael abruptly quitting the Jackson 5 mid-performance, making his ultimate break for true independence. And that break for independence, it wasn't just a shift in family dynamics, it demanded a completely new visual language. The second he steps out as a solo artist, the production design of the film had to physically match the unprecedented scale of his superstar era.
Oh, absolutely.
They couldn't just throw together some sparkly clothes. They had to operate like historical forensic investigators.
The level of detail here borders on the obsessive. Costume designer Marcy Rogers compiled an 800-page research Bible.
800 pages, that's insane.
Just massive, relying heavily on vintage Ebony and Jet magazines to ensure complete cultural and historical accuracy.
And the costume revelations from that are wild. For example, everyone pictures the famous jacket Michael wore to the 1984 Grammys as being covered in sequins, right?
Right, that's what I always thought.
But Rogers discovered it wasn't sequins at all. It was entirely constructed of hand-sewn bugle beads. So she recreated it authentically, and the finished garment weighed 15 pounds. Wow. Think about the physics of that for a second. Jafar is trying to execute the most fluid, gravity-defying dance moves in history, while essentially wearing a medieval chainmail suit made of beads.
Which meant the clothes really had to be engineered, not just tailored. Like, she dyed the famous red jeans from the Thriller video multiple times just to match the exact original red Pantone color under the specific lighting of the set.
That is dedication.
And even crazier, she had to build hidden, reinforced gussets into the seams of Jafar's pants.
Because if you don't, the second he hits that iconic high leg kick, he's going to rip his pants right down the middle in front of 100 crew members.
Exactly. The wardrobe had to look like high fashion, but perform like Olympic athletic gear. And the way they captured that athletic gear in motion is a massive departure from typical musical biopics. Cinematographer Dion Bibe decided to treat this film's musical numbers like an action movie.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because they use these massive Sony Venice 2 cameras paired with ingenue 12:1 zoom lenses, and they leaned heavily on handheld Steadicam setups.
Yeah.
Over the course of the shoot, they captured more than an hour and a half of pure musical performance footage. And using a zoom lens and a handheld rig to shoot a meticulously choreographed dance sequence, it's like shooting a live wildlife documentary.
Oh, totally.
You can't ask a cheetah to run a little slower because the camera operator missed his mark, you know? You just have to adapt, follow the predator, and keep up with the magic in real time.
That is the perfect way to visualize it, because the mechanics of a normal film set would have just destroyed the performance. Usually you shoot with prime lenses, meaning they don't zoom.
Right, fixed focal length.
Exactly. So if you want a close-up, you have to yell, "Cut! Stop the music!" Physically move the camera track closer, change the lens, and then ask the actor to ramp their energy back up to a 10.
Which ruins the vibe completely.
Right. Baby knew that stopping to change lenses would shatter Jafar's physical flow. So the zoom lenses and handheld movement allowed the camera to become a completely active participant in the choreography. It never breaks the spell. As a viewer, it plunges you right into the sheer, sweaty, kinetic energy of a sold-out arena, rather than making you feel like an observer on a sterile soundstage.
And to make sure you actually feel the passage of time through the different eras, they contrasted those slick, modern digital cameras with 16mm Canon scoop cameras.
Oh, I love that they did that.
Yeah, for those unfamiliar, these are the exact kind of loud, clunky, film-grain cameras you'd see actual local news crews lugging around in the 1970s.
Yeah.
It gives the early Jackson 5 footage this vintage found footage grit.
It creates this subconscious visual timeline. You literally watch the texture of the world evolve and sharpen around him as his stardom transitions from raw talent to a polished global phenomenon.
And that commitment to authentic texture extended right down to the literal concrete the cast walked on. Matching the Kinetic camera style required matching the physical environment. Which brings us to the massive practical recreations and how the production navigated the messy line between historical fact and fiction.
Yeah, because they didn't take the easy way out with green screens. The crew fully rebuilt portions of the Neverland Ranch.
Which is a huge undertaking.
Massive. They even took a closed-down Kmart in Burbank and entirely transformed the interior into a period-accurate 1980s Toys R Us just to faithfully recreate his famous after-hours private shopping sprees.
I just love that detail.
Yeah.
I mean, why build a whole store when you could use a computer? Because giving the actors a tactile environment, real toys to pick up, real aisles to walk down, it changes the entire posture of a performance.
It really does.
And the thriller sequence. They filmed the zombie dance on the exact same street, Union Pacific Avenue in California, where the original music video was shot back in 1983. They even had an assistant director step into the scene to play the original director, John Landis, because he looked just like him holding a script. Oh, and Lady Gaga quietly lent original Michael Jackson outfits from her personal archival collection to the production for free, just to ensure the fabrics on screen were the real deal.
That is so cool. And you know, the dedication to authenticity is just as heavy in the sound mix. The film's 13-track companion album reveals a truly unique audio approach.
Right.
So Jafar was singing live on set, exerting all that physical energy. But for the final theatrical mix, the sound engineers directly blended Jafar's raw vocals on top of Michael's pristine original studio tracks. It creates this seamless hybrid voice.
It's almost like an audio ghost story. You have the physical breath, the footfalls, and the modern exertion of Jafar happening in the room, mapped perfectly over the original haunting frequencies of Michael from 40 years ago.
Yeah, it's chilling in the best way.
Though it is worth noting, Jafar sings the raw a cappella sections entirely himself. But let's look at the fact versus fiction here, because the trivia is fascinating. For instance, Michael's famous pet chimp, Bubbles. He is entirely CGI in the film. Fun fact, the real Bubbles is incredibly still alive today at 43 years old.
I could not believe that when I read it. 43.
Right. Also, the infamous 1984 Pepsi commercial where Michael's hair caught fire is depicted with brutal accuracy.
They really aren't just showing the platinum records, they're showing the severe physical and emotional toll the fame took on his body.
We do need to address the controversy surrounding the film's narrative boundaries, though.
Yeah.
And for you listening, we're just impartially reporting the factual hurdles of the production here. The film completely omits the child sexual abuse allegations that dominated the later years of his life.
Right?
According to the sources, the settlement reached with the victims included a strict, ironclad legal agreement stating that the allegations and the individuals involved can never be mentioned in a film.
And that created a massive, unavoidable parameter for the production. That specific legal restriction actually forced the studio to spend $15 million on 22 days of reshoots late in the game in June 2025.
$15 million just on reshoots.
Yeah, they were legally obligated to remove certain sensitive elements and completely alter the ending of the film to comply with those strict boundaries.
Which poses a really complex question for anyone walking into the theater. If a biographical film legally cannot include major, life-defining controversies due to courtroom settlements, can it still be considered an accurate historical document? Or does it inherently transition into purely being a celebration of artistry?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights the inherent tension of the modern biopic. The filmmakers were boxed in by an incredibly rigid legal reality. Because of those constraints, director Antoine Fuqua intentionally leaned heavily into the artistry.
Which makes sense.
The music, the stage presence, the sheer magic of the performances. He focused the lens on the stage, which is the only place where Michael felt most like Superman. It leaves the audience to understand that while the man's personal legacy is entangled in incredibly complex legal realities that the film literally cannot touch, the scale of his cultural impact and the art he left behind remains undeniably massive. It operates as a document of his work, rather than a complete document of his life.
That is a deeply fascinating lens to view it through. It's almost like walking through a museum exhibit of his greatest creative triumphs, framed constantly by the immense crushing pressure that forged them.
Exactly. And by blending Jafar's raw, bleeding feet dedication with Michael's actual voice and history, the film creates an experience that is far more about the visceral feeling of witnessing the icon rather than attempting a play-by-play recitation of the tabloid headlines.
It really leaves you with something profound to mull over regarding legacy. Think about it when a historical figure's life is so heavily documented by the media, yet heavily restricted by family involvement and ironclad legal settlements. Perhaps the only unvarnished truth left for us to explore is the art itself. Think back to that audio design in the film we just talked about. Jafar's voice is literally blended with Michael's. When the performer is gone, their legacy isn't static. It becomes a literal, breathing collaboration between the past and the present.
Beautifully said. It's a collaboration that just keeps evolving.
And that wraps our deep dive into Michael. If you enjoyed exploring the story behind the legend, follow roll credits and share it with your fellow music and movie fans. And don't forget to drop a comment with what movie or show we should cover next, old or new. We'll be back soon with more trivia, more movie magic, and maybe a few more legendary performances.